Hello, everybody, for another episode of the StacyM Show. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Leanne, and she can introduce herself probably better than what I can. So, Leanne, can you please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Leanne Tran. I'm a psychologist who has worked with children and families for, over a decade. It's getting along, I'm getting old here.
No,
Um,
it's experienced. You're
yes,
experienced.
that's right. It is experience. And what I've changed in the last little while, I think, is shifting my focus to providing a lot of information online that's really easy to access for parents. Because really, helping kids is a great thing, and I love my job a lot, but I see them for an hour a week or a fortnight, and parents are with their kids all the time. So I think
Yeah.
empowering parents to know how to help their own kids is what's really going to make big changes. So I often work with kids who are developing differently, so maybe autistic or have ADHD, and challenging behaviours that may not be related to that. Sometimes it's other things, anxiety or whatever. So my goal is to make sure that no parent feels like they don't know what they're doing, because they can access some education and information, but also understand how they can tailor that strategy to fit their own particular child and family.
That's amazing. So we have known each other for a little while now,
Yeah,
and
yep,
it had just come up in a conversation how we were very similar in that I'd rather save a relationship than end one. Caveat, obviously, DV. I don't mean that,
yeah,
but looking at the stats, and we were talking before, relationships where there are kids that do have high needs, autistic, ADHD, whatever that might
yep,
be, the
yeah,
separation rate, I don't say divorce rate because not everybody is married, so I use
yeah,
separation,
yep,
is as high as like 75 to 85%. So you
yeah,
thought it was about that 75%. I
yep,
definitely did not have it that high, and it's
yeah,
massive. And to me, that's just way, way too much. And we had so much in common in that we want to help. You don't want to see the relationship end either. I'd rather not have to deal with the legal aspect of a separation if we can resolve the issues. And when your odds are stacked against you to 85% of relationships ending with kids with special needs,
mm,
that's massive. So yeah, we're
yep,
definitely on the same page. We're just trying to provide as much information as we possibly can. And you're right, where when you're one-on-one with a client, it's just not enough time. So we're trying to do the one-to-many and try and educate people as much as we can.
yep,
Today's podcast is going to be about, though, when that doesn't happen. So when the relationship does end. So Leanne and I will be doing many more podcasts. So we'll cover as many things as we possibly can. But today is when that relationship, unfortunately, does end. And
mm,
co-parenting between houses. So that can be difficult with kids that don't have special needs. Kids with special needs, that's a lot. That can look a lot more different, and each kid is also different in each situation and family dynamic and everything.
yeah.
So we're talking about co-parenting after separation and how to manage um, the kids going between houses. So what effect, first of all, does having kids go between separate houses have on them?
I think, yeah, all of those points are really good. And I think for me, the statistics that talk about the separation rates are that being so high reminds me of research that shows that having children with ADHD is one of the most stressful experiences of parenting there is. And some studies also sometimes compare being a parent to children with high needs as being like having PTSD type
Oh,
implications for
wow.
parents. So I think that goes a little way to explaining why it's so difficult. And then I think that is what you need to kind of keep in mind when you're considering doing the co-parenting as well. That it's really stressful for both parties, but the impact it has on the kids is that it's really stressful for kids as well. Kids can pick up things like emotions, even if we're not directly talking to our kids about this stuff. They can feel the tension and the stress that's there. So trying to understand that even, your child probably picks up more than you realize, and they know more about what's going on than you realize. So one of the biggest impacts for the kids is increased stress, and that can, down the path, if not supported, can lead to other things like anxiety or depression as well. So trying to really keep in mind how to support your kids through that initial transition is important. I'm trying to think of what the other thing I wanted to mention was about it. I think
so we have a few. So the big one was just managing between the households, which can be difficult without kids with high needs. But is there, to elaborate on the going between the different houses, I mean, each situation is obviously different. Each kid is different, each whatever. We're making the assumption that, mum and dad, or mum and dad, the relationship is still amicable and you still want the best interest of the kids and stuff. Would your advice be
healthy?
So apart from maybe seeing one parent one day and then not the next, do you have any tips on, and pending court orders? So, oh God, that's another kettle of fish. Like, try to incorporate this in court orders. There's another podcast. But is there any quick tips that might be general in nature on just how to balance the kids shifting? Like, half a week with mum or dad, a week with mum, a day each. Like, is there anything, just a quick win that somebody might be able to have if they're initially separating and they haven't, gone down the separation legal path or whatever? Is there a quick win? Is there a quick win that people might be able to incorporate today that can help manage that co-parenting separate household thing?
Yeah, there is, and it kind of links to that bit I'd forgotten before, but it came back to me slowly. It must be that experience thing you mentioned before.
It's Friday, come
on. But it's that kids, like, the thing that affects them too is that, think about us as adults. We've got fully formed brains that can be organized and keep ourselves together to whatever varying degree of normal we are.
Mine's a bit mushed at the moment, so.
But so kids are still developing all of those skills as well. So the separation kind of, because it doubles the amount of, the number of homes in their lives, it requires more organization and memory and all of that kind of stuff that kids are still developing over time. So I think when you talk about that being one of the impacts of separation on kids, it's important to think about that, because that leads into the strategies that can then help them. And so some of the strategies I talk about are things for parents to do. And the first one is to try to, you got to maintain open communication and positive communication with your co-parent, because that's how you can be on the same page and have the same approach to your kids. As part of that, having that kind of open communication, I think it's really important to have the same rules and expectations across homes as well.
That's a good idea. You don't want some parent being harder than another one and the kid's not wanting to go to the other parent or something like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And the thing too is, with kids, they learn through consistency. So the more consistent and on the same page you can both be, the quicker the kids will get their head around what's expected. Whereas if it's different at mum's, different at dad's, then the kids don't learn. They don't learn as easily, which means their behavior can kind of be up and down and all over the place.
Yeah.
And that happens with emotions anyway. So you should expect some kind of level of your kids potentially acting out a bit more or having more meltdowns or teary episodes, because that's just a normal part of adapting to the change.
Yeah.
Um,
I want
the
to
more,
minimize that on the kids and yourself as
yeah,
much as possible. You don't want to make it harder for anybody to,
yeah,
deal with the added stress.
yeah, exactly. And it's important too, because the more you have those consistent rules and expectations, the better the kid kind of copes. But then it's less pressure and stress on you as a parent as well. So whereas if you go the other way and they're acting out and you get more stressed, it becomes this kind of spiral that can be tricky to get
Yeah.
out of.
Yeah. So really the key tip for that, if you're currently going through a separation and you're trying to manage or looking at managing between two households, being on the same page and trying to keep the routine as much as you possibly can and having the same rules. It's not the word I want,
Yep.
but let's go with rules at
Yeah.
both houses. So the kids either don't like a parent more than the other if one's not enforcing those rules or those boundaries. But it also makes it easier for them to process, okay, so I do this here, I have to do this at mum or dad's house.
Yeah.
And that overall is going to make it easier on you and your child or your children, because you're not adding unnecessary extra stress on top of a situation that's already stressful.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
And then another clear part, I think, is to have the same routines across households as well, which is sometimes trickier because parents have different types of jobs. But and when I talk about routines, it's things like, sleep time and wake time, and maybe what they're allowed to do after school, whether it's homework or screen time. And that makes the transition from one home to the other a lot easier.
Yeah.
You can probably imagine if, bedtime is 7:30 at one house and 10 at another house, then once the kids had a few 10 p.m. bedtimes and then they've got to
Yeah.
transition to another house, it's just an
It's not going to
extra
end
bit.
well.
Yeah, exactly. So trying to make it as consistent with the routines as possible is good as well.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen all the time. And you're not a failure if that doesn't happen. I mean, kids have good days and bad days like we do.
Yep.
So it's just doing what you can when you can and being as consistent as you possibly can. And there's caveats, there's holidays, there's going out for
Yeah.
dinners, or
Yep. Absolutely.
that's all in there. But as consistent and the routine as you possibly can. Something else we wanted to talk about is just some common pitfalls in co-parenting. So we've probably already touched on that, in that the rules being different at either household. What other pitfalls have you seen with co-parenting, especially with kids with those higher needs?
I think, well, one common one I see when there's kids with diagnoses of autism or ADHD is that potentially parents aren't on the same page with that and the supports that their kids require. And that's an incredibly tricky situation. And for that, I'd really recommend trying to see if you can get on the same page initially, or even to be able to go and see somebody like a psychologist, or do some online learning to see if you can get on the same page about some parts, or maybe make some headway, because it's what we don't want is because kids take their identity from the messages they get around them. And so if kids get the message that dad doesn't think I'm autistic or something like that, they kind of start to think, well, who am I? And that's a really, really hard place for kids to be. And the other thing is to try to keep in mind providing, because it undermines that kind of emotional safety or acceptance.
Yeah.
So even if you don't agree, just maybe keep it to yourself if you can, and
Can we just internally agree for the moment while we?
Yeah, exactly. And go and deal with that in the ways that you need to, because I'm not saying you have to accept that forever, but trying to take all of that as the adult responsibility and not a message that you're giving your kids. But for all kids, I think it's about the emotion of it. They need to know that home is a place they can safely be themselves and not have their behavior cause negative emotions in their parents. And what I mean by that is that if you are getting upset about things that they've talked about at the other parent's home, then kids learn that, I shouldn't talk about that. And it starts, they don't, they might bottle it up, they might let it out somewhere else, but they start to not be able to just do things in the way that's natural to them. And that's when those mental health difficulties or behavior difficulties can really come into play.
And that's where we definitely don't want to get, you don't want to cause any additional stress on yourselves or the kids. I had something I was going to say, I can't remember what it was. And especially don't tell the kids that the separation has occurred because of them. Like, don't tell any child, regardless of whether they've got a special ability or not, to go, right, well, we're separated because you're stressing us out and it's killed the relationship. Like, don't, I know that's common sense, but I know sometimes that doesn't exist, and don't talk about it in front of the kids as well. Like, kids aren't dumb and they're exposed to so much more now than when they were, like, when we were kids. Like, we didn't have the internet until year 11, year 12. So they're exposed to so much more stuff now. So keep it out of sight and out of hearing from the kids. Don't tell the kids it's their fault. Like, that's horrible. And
what you said about keeping it out of their minds and notice is really important too, I think, because sometimes, just on Monday, I had a child tell me about how his parents kind of made little digs at each other to him. And so then he, is young but aware enough to know that that's happening. He loves both his parents. So it's really conflicting if you are saying something negative about a co-parent, and so your kid's thinking, well, I love you, but I also love them, and what am I meant to do with this conflict and information? So not trying to use I don't think people try to use their kids
as pawns. It's probably just they don't react with emotion, but sometimes it's like, I don't know, can you go pick the kids up from school? Oh, your dad was meant to pick you up from school. Like it's spur of the moment, probably things, or something's just tipped you over the line, or you've had a bad day and it's come out, and it's going to happen. Like, I don't think, and it's not going to be on purpose. Sometimes it might be if you're that way inclined, but it would just slip out, and acknowledge that you kind of said that. Sorry, I didn't mean that. Mum and dad both love you, or mum and mum, or dad and dad, like, we both love you. It's kind of acknowledging, yep, okay, I've said that, but then try to diffuse the situation so that poor child not, confused as to, well, do I believe dad, mum, dad, like, what, what do I do with it? What do I respond? Like, how do I, dad's an ass, or mum's an ass. Like, how, they're processing that as well. So just and then acknowledge that you've said it and go, yep, sorry,
Exactly. So my two pieces of advice are to, first of all, you're not going to be perfect. If you're just aiming for, getting this right 70, 80% of the time, that's great. You're never going to be perfect at it, because it comes from a place of emotion. Humans are emotional creatures, so it's going to happen.
Something's going to happen,
And the second thing is, like you said, you can just apologize to your kids about it, and there's no shame or weakness in that. In fact, it's a really great thing to be able to model to your kids. I made a mistake there. I let my emotions get the better of me. I apologize for that. You're teaching your kids how to manage when their emotions get the better of them, and how to apologize to others. So it's not a mistake. You don't have to be perfect, but these are just things to try to work on each day.
And then the other thing we had, which I think we've also discussed, is how you can make things run smoothly across between homes, but between both homes. So I think we pretty well cover that. Is trying to keep that same routine as close as you possibly can. There's obviously caveats to that with school holidays and going away on holidays and dinners and lunches and all of that. I said, you're not a failure if it doesn't work. Some days you're just going to have a bad day and you might cry yourself to sleep or something like that. Those days are going to happen, and that's okay. Like, they happen regardless of whether you go through separation sometimes. So don't be hard on yourself if the child went to bed at 8:30 instead of 8, for example. At least it wasn't 9. Yeah. So can you think of any other tips to try and help run smooth? Like, what about things like carting clothes back and forth and having the same furniture and bedroom set up and all of that? Would that come into play?
Sometimes it can. I think probably minimizing, definitely if kids have ADHD, too, minimizing the amounts of moving stuff from home to home is great. I'd have doubles of everything so that you can just have one set at each house. They don't have to have that mental load of taking things back and forth. But the biggest thing I would suggest is to use visual supports to try and communicate to your kids what's going on. And those are things that psychologists and OTs and speech pathologists commonly use. And it's really just about, think about it like a way of presenting the rules and the routine, but in poster format for your kids. So
as in, like, you're drawing things for them, or like how?
Kind of like almost like a calendar, or like the weekly plan of which days they're at mum's, which days they're at dad's, and that kind of thing. So I know it's a complex idea for families who are new to it. So I do have a guide on my website, which people can download, and it'll teach you how to do it. But then if you set it up so that you've got one copy at mum's, one parent's, one the other. I don't mean to keep saying mum and dad like that's the only option. So that then, because I think it reduces that memory load and the stress and anxiety that can come from it. So if kids have if your routine stays the same and it's week on, week off, that's great. Or if it's half the week, and you can have a chart that's got what they're doing Monday to Sunday, which house they're in, and that kind of thing. That can be really helpful for kids to, it's almost like us using a calendar as adults. Most of us will, or pretty much everyone has a calendar, right? But we don't think about that for kids. We kind of just expect if we tell them they'll understand and remember. But if you can actually give them something visual, they can feel a lot more organized and calm.
Yeah, and that's kind of assuming that the parents are like 9 to 5 office jobs as well. If you have a shift worker and that roster is not the same, it could be 4 on, 4 off, might be night shift, day shift, afternoon shift, whatever it might be. Do you have any tips on maybe how
to do that?
Yeah, just because there's probably going to be a routine to it. Most rosters like 4, 5, 6 weeks or whatever, but it's not. There might be seeing one parent twice 1 week, and then it might be 4. So that is a routine, but it's a routine that's going to take them probably a little while to work out, because the rosters go over 6 weeks. They might not get that next time with that parent until like 6 weeks down the track type thing. So is there anything for shift workers perhaps that might be helpful?
Yeah, I use the same approach and just tweak it a little bit. When my kids were little, my husband was doing shift work as well, and so it was really confusing. And you're like, "Where's Dad for four days all of a sudden?" So
he's around somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. So we would use it. So still the same thing about the week, but you can use things like Velcro or magnets to stick different pictures on. And so we would have pictures for when Dad's home, when he's away. You could do it for example, sometimes in that shift work scenario, grandparents are picking up the kids or things like that. So you can set it out so that you can interchange and almost have this routine of everything that's up there by pictures, or if the kids are older, even a family calendar that just kind of, but
Gets updated.
actually, yeah, the problem with that is that it's hard to keep it updated at both homes. That's why I like something that you can just knock up in Microsoft Word and print out so that then it's at both houses.
Yeah, you've got family sharing, I think. I'm not quite techie. I know families that have like family calendars, and I'm sure you could probably put grandparents in the mix if they need to be, but things like that. I said, I'm not techie, but if electronic and your kids have got phones or something, I think there's like a family sharing calendar option type thing that you might be able to explore, but that obviously won't work for younger kids, but could be a suggestion.
But if your kids are old enough to have a phone, that's a great idea, because it's all just about the communication. And you mentioned a good point before about, they may not see that parent for 6 weeks if it's shift work, and it can start to, because there's that change and you've gone from one unit of a family to 2 units, and kids maybe don't see that one parent for a while, there's a bit of that unease of thinking, is this another permanent change? So having the calendar that explains where that parent is and when they'll be around again gives, communicates to the child what's happening.
Yeah, and they're not abandoned. Dad or mum is at, or even if they're FIFO, they might be in another state or something, like, mum, dad, parent still loves you. You see on the calendar, so they're going to fly over here, and they're going to see them here. So it's not thinking that parent's abandoned them or something. It's just this is how mum, dad's roster is. Look, let's count down the days to maybe when you see them again, or trying to. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where it came from. So when I had my first child, obviously I've got it from somewhere, but from when my kids were literally babies, I would wake up and be like, right, so today we're going to, I'll get you changed and change your nappy. Then, mum's going to make a cup of tea. So then we're going to sit in the lounge room, and then we're going to do this, and we have lunch today. And I still do that. My kids are like nearly 11 and nearly 13. So I will even go now, kind of like on a Sunday, I'm like, right, so this is what we got. Tomorrow I take you to school. Tomorrow I'll pick you up. Tuesday we've got this. Wednesday we've got this. So I've done that with my kids, and they're not special high needs. They're none of that. It's obviously something I read, I got told. I had no idea when I had my first. And I still do that. And they're like, cool, right, I know what I'm doing. Like touch is about to start again. So right, so Wednesdays we've lost, like Wednesdays are out, we've got touch, and we've got a first birthday party on Saturday. So that's something that I had always done anyway. And they're like, cool. Like we know we know what's happening for the weekend. They're like, cool.
Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome. Intuitive parenting. But it's
as I said, I don't know. I don't know where it came from, but
no. But all kids thrive on routine. So it's not just kids with different needs as well. They all thrive on routine. So the more you can keep the routine, but also communicate it with them clearly, then the better they'll handle everything.
Yeah, it's I said can't tell you where I heard it, read it, or whatever, but there's no reason why you can't do that with your kids in general. I said mine are nearly 11 and 13, and I'm still doing it. I think it's habit now as well. But it's I don't know. But thank you very much. We've spoken, and there's so many things. As we were talking then, I'm like, oh, we can talk about that, and so we'll definitely be doing further podcasts in the future, so we can help you as much as we possibly can to whatever situation or whatever stage you're at. But if people want to follow you, contact you, work with you, you've got a course coming out next week, where can people work with you and find you?
Yeah, good question. My leannetran.com.au is my website. And I do have a course every quarter where I take a group of parents through lots of the basics of things to know to really create a positive environment for your kids. It's going to work really well if you're having challenges with them. It's called Chaos to Calm.
I like
So
that.
that's, yeah, who doesn't want to go from
I feel
chaos
like
to
I need
calm?
to do that.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I need that, but yeah, so that's a great place. But also I'll share the link for the resources for the visual supports, because I think that could be one that would be so great for lots of families to have. I think it's, I can't remember the website exactly, but we'll put the link
pop
in
all the
the
links up so you can follow
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be, yeah, that's a really good start, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely make sure that we put Leanne's links in the podcast so you can follow her or get those resources that she's offered, which is fantastic. But thank you very much for coming on today. There will definitely be more collaboration in the future.
Yeah.
But
Great.
hopefully that helps a little bit. Hopefully there's some takeaways from that you can implement. And I said, yeah, there'll be plenty more to come, but hopefully that helps you. And yeah, thank you very much again for Leanne.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.